and this is our podcast, Tenacious Recovery. You got to be tenacious about your recovery if you want to stay sober. And we're coming in live today because we're a traveling podcast. We're coming in today from Devon, Pennsylvania.
It is with great pleasure I introduce our next guest, a very, very close personal friend of mine, and honestly a big part of my story. I don't know if he's aware of that, but he's a huge part of my story. Pastor Jason Creel.
Yo, what's going on, everybody? Thanks for having me.
You're here, brother.
My man.
Thank you for having me.
So, I mean, typically the way we do it is tell us your story, man. Start from the beginning.
Yeah, so what's going on, everybody? My name is Jason Creel. Some people call me Pastor J. I haven't always been a pastor. I'm blessed. God has blessed my life wholeheartedly. I'm a husband, a father, and a convicted felon twice over. So that word pastor, don't let it fool you. I was in the streets for a big slice of my life. I grew up in a rough setting. There's no doubt about it. There's no way to sugarcoat it. I'm an alcoholic and an addict too. And for the longest time, I didn't even know what an alcoholic actually was, right? People used to say you're an alcoholic and all these other things to me. And I literally didn't understand what that was at the time. Looking back and realizing now that I do suffer from a 3-stage, in my own personal opinion, of a disease of addiction and alcoholism. I suffer from a 3-stage disease, a mental obsession over drugs or alcohol, which means I'm thinking about it constantly. And once I put one into my body, I developed a phenomenon of craving. This craving is limited to a select class, right? So like once I put a drink or a drug into my body, I can't stop and I can't put it down. And when I do stop, I can't stay stopped. It needs to be a power greater than me. I always had some periods of sobriety. Anytime they will put me into institution, I went through a few treatment centers, but I never got sober that way. I always had to be removed from myself and put behind bars. Like that's just been my experience. And I've always done well when I was locked up or incarcerated because it's a power greater than you. They told you what to do. They told you when to eat. They told you to go out to the yard. I knew how to jail really well. I was always good at bidding. It was only when they released me is when the actual problems occurred. I never had a problem being sentenced. It was always upon my release. I was always more afraid than when I got there.
You said you did well, in prison. Isn't that because you just couldn't get what you needed? You were basically drug and alcohol free, but to use the word sobriety, you want to talk about that a minute?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So let me kind of back up a little bit. Every day I was there, I was thinking about it.
Right.
Exactly. So let me just say that mental obsession was so strong, and it was wild too because when I was shooting heroin, right? I was shooting heroin for over a decade. I started at 14 years old, and I'll get to that part of my story. But when I was there, I would always say, okay, well, opiates. Like I got to stay away from the opiates. I know that if I shoot heroin, I'm going to wind back up in the jail cell again. And you look at my jail cells or my jail sentences. One time I did 2 years. One time I did 1. So we'll just stick to the 1. When I was there, the first 6 months, I'm like, I'm swearing off heroin. I'm never doing it again. It's not happening. And then when we get closer to my release date, it wasn't so bad, right? Right. Maybe I could take some perks,
One thing about me is when I'm sober or when I'm dry, I always forget. I always forget how badly I get burned. Every single time. And that's honestly what cultivates it as a disease for me.
Because we only look back. Technically, when you look at, let's say you're in jail for a year, we look back and we think like, well, was it really that bad? I'm sober almost 38 years.
Amen.
And I look back and I say, well, was it that bad? Well, I mean, seriously, was it that bad? Because you know why? 38 years removed, you could only think of the good stuff. You don't think of the last rites you got in the hospital in South Philly. You don't think of flying through a car windshield. You don't think of nearly dying several different times. You only think of the good stuff, right?
Yeah, I mean, I actually did die from heroin 3 times, right? And I was an alcoholic through and through as well. And like, that's the disease, right? It's the only disease that says you don't have it, number one. But it's also the insane obsession of every abnormal drinker or drug user is that they can actually pick up a drink successfully. That's literally going to be the thing that kind of puts people back. Well, it wasn't that bad, or it's not going to do what it did last time. And to their credit, it might not. It might be worse.
Right.
More often than not, it is.
Yeah, it's like...
You usually go back twice as hard.
Oh,
you know what I mean? Like when you relapse like you never stopped. And it's like almost twice as hard.
Oh, it's 10 times as worse.
Oh, it's true. And then you get to a point where you don't even care because you don't have a life. right? And they say you can't, live with it. You can't live without it. It says, few know that lonely, dark place. I've been to that dark place. I never want to go back again. Praise God. But I was dead, physically dead. And my first thought when they brought me back is why?
Yeah.
Why did you bring me back to this miserable existence? You fast forward 13 years clean and sober now, I shudder to think that I almost missed this life.
Right.
I almost missed it.
The good part of it.
Even the bad now today with my kids.
Right.
They can listen, Vinny, my kids, trust me, they're no treat. They're just like their pop. I got 3 beautiful boys. You know what I mean?
Vinny, this guy's son
bless
broke
you.
the same arm twice in 1 month.
Yes, he did. my man told me he was playing freeze tag. I was like, you stink at that game. You need to just cut it out.
Oh my God. That's funny.
Yeah. But no, like I get to see my kids grow up. I will go back a little bit because I didn't actually have that. I grew up with a father who was an alcoholic and an addict, and he was supremely violent. He was so aggressive, and he would just continue to beat me and my brothers. That's just a fact. I know people are out there right now. You might be suffering from some of the trauma that you felt in your past and everything. Just remember that your past doesn't define you. And I believe in God. I know not everybody believes in that. Obviously, I'm a pastor. We know what I believe in. At the end of the day, I don't care what you believe in right now. Just believe in you. Just know that I believe in you. That's a fact because God is a fan of the underdog. That's the legit true experience of my own walk. I grew up in this broken, violent, tumultuous household, and my dad he almost killed my mom multiple times. My mom is an absolute saint. Both me and my 2 brothers all touched the penitentiary. We were not Boy Scouts by no stretch of the imagination. I was the only one that had the disease of addiction out of all 3 of us. My dad did too. And this is how I knew when we talked about the dry sobriety. This is a real experience, a fact of my own experience before I picked up any drugs or alcohol. I was 9 years old. I'll never forget it. My dad was sober for 2 years. And for those 2 years, it was the most violent 2 years that we've ever had in our lives.
When he was sober?
When he was dry sober.
He was living the dry drunk syndrome,
Period.
which is picture a constant hangover of epic proportion.
Yeah.
And now what do? You're angry. You take it out on people. And that's why I said you can't use sobriety when you were in jail. You were dry, just like your old man was dry. And he just took everything out on you guys too.
The only relief we ever had is when he went to the bar, when he would relapse.
Wow.
Right? And I don't know if he ever went to these meetings and he got what they call a sponsor. I don't know if he did those things, but that sponsor wasn't teaching him. But what happens? Broken households. Right? That's why it's so important if you are in recovery and you're doing some type of program to help somebody else. If you're the only person benefiting from your sobriety, you're doing it wrong.
Right.
That's been my experience. You're doing it wrong. My sobriety isn't about me anymore, praise God. Neither is my life, praise God. Because the minute to control, the minute that I try to control things in my own walk, still to this day, 13 years later, the more the things become uncontrollable. And my dad's experience has been my experience too. When you're sober, that's just the ante in the poker game, right? It gets you to the table. Because what does it say that we are? Without a spiritual remedy, without helping other people, without actually being recovered from a hopeless state of mind and body. It says we're restless, irritable, and never content. Let me say that again, because there's somebody out there right now that's restless as heck right now. They're restless, irritable, and never content unless they can get that sense and ease and comfort that comes at what? Taking a few drinks. Drinks that they see others taking with impunity, means without consequences. Mine always had consequences. They used to tell me, play the tape. Well, I can't play it because it gets crazy. After you die, what's next?
Right.
I was miserable. And so that was my experience with my dad. He was, he went to jail himself too a few times. And it was just a nightmare. There's times that I was a little kid that would be so afraid to leave the house because I thought he would kill my mom. That's how violent he was. And today I call him, he passed away from his alcoholism. His liver ended up shutting down. I call him spiritually sick. My mom calls him a lot worse, though. You know what I'm saying?
I'm sure.
As she should.
And she should, right. That's fine.
No, exactly. And I had the crazy experience with the redeeming qualities that we've had, me and my dad, towards the end of his life. And I'll speak about that as well. But I remember wholeheartedly the first time that I ever picked up drink when I was real young. I was probably 10 or 11 years old. And the state stepped in and my mom signed her parental rights over. And I went to a foster home in 12 years. It was a one house. This guy, his name is Fred. He passed away since. Really a nice guy. He was trying to take kids that were in the streets more into his house. And there was a couple other kids there and everything like that. And I just couldn't get down with the rules that this guy had for me. And I was like 13 years old. And I decided to run away. So I did. And I ran away at the age of 13 and went to North Philly, and where my brother was living on 5th Street, and started selling drugs with my brother. And that's what we were doing to survive, and selling heroin. And unfortunately, when you start shooting the product, you don't make a lot of money.
Definitely not.
Yeah,
Nope.
you don't make a lot of money. And but I do remember vividly, though, like the times that I would drink and I would just continue to drink and until I would black out. And I never was successful at drinking or even using any type of drugs. It was always at excess and ad infinitum. I would just continue to keep going and going. And I did have people that tried to help me. Looking back, like I always was like, nah, I didn't really have like a lot of help. But the longer sober I got, the more I realized I didn't have it as bad as my mind thought that I did. Like my story 100% is unique to me, just like your story is unique to you.
Sure.
But the 3 stages of alcoholism and the brokenness and the despair and the loneliness, you could be in a room full of people and still feel lonely. And that feeling of like not fitting in and all these different things, I was still plagued by those type of things. And that was the principle of it. But I remember vividly, my mom, one time I was really addicted to pills at this point in my life. And I went to some random treatment center, state ran one or whatever. And I came home, and I remember relapsing really early on, and I was sniffing pills in her bathroom, and she would be knocking on the door. She graciously let me into her life again, and she used to knock on the door and say, "What's wrong with you?" And I would be in there crying because I didn't have anything to tell her. I just didn't know. I didn't know that I was suffering from a spiritual disease. Like, if you would have told me that when I was running the streets of North Philadelphia, you're suffering from a spiritual, I would have said, beat it. Yeah,
You would have laughed at us.
I know, it's the truth.
You're like, this is just me.
Yeah,
Right.
it goes back to, I thought I was dealt a bad hand in life. I really did. For the longest time, I would try to blame other people. I would blame that because of my dad. I would blame because I didn't receive the love from my mom that I did. I blame. I never wanted to take accountability into my life. And that's why I was convicted felon. You know what I mean? Like, I continued to find relief in other things, in bottles and women and all these different things, and breaking the law, and I would end up being put away. Excuse me. And so that's what, that's what happened to me. I would continue to go in and out of people's lives. My mom, she remarried my stepfather, Jim, an amazing Vietnam War veteran, a sweetheart of a guy. And he allowed me.
How old were you?
I was 23 at least. Well, I was 17 when she remarried
When she remarried him.
But I was already living on the streets of North Philly. Like, legit streets.
Oh, yeah.
So I was like heavy in the streets at that time. They would come and like down to my little row home that I had on 5th Street with my brother and stuff like that. And then my brother ended up getting sent to state prison for selling handguns to a detective. And so he went up state prison. So now I'm sitting in this, house or whatever and just doing all crazy types of stuff. And my stepfather, man, he tried his best, 100%. He tried his best to be the dad that I actually never had. You want to know? He let me move in with him. He let me move in with him. I was 18, 19 or whatever when it was after my first prison sentence. He let me move in with him. You know how I repaid him? I robbed him. Sleep, pride, possessions, stuff that I could never give back to him. I took from him. The only man who actually tried to be influential in my life. A sweetheart dude, and I robbed him. My mom. I'll never forget this. This is why I know, like, when I used to come home from jail, I would do good. I'll get myself a little job. I'll get myself a little, nice girlfriend. I'm starting to stack a little chicken, stack a little paper, and then suddenly, see, I read this other book, and it's italicized. It says suddenly. Suddenly, the thought crosses my mind. The thought crosses my mind that maybe it wasn't so bad. And this is the insane obsession. It keeps going over and over. And I was as sober as it could get. Living at my mom's house, she graciously let me in after I robbed from her. And I would have tears in my eyes going down the hallway ready to pick her jewelry box. As sober can get. I didn't want to anymore. I didn't want to. I didn't know I didn't have the power not to. And I would rob her once again. And you would keep on continuing on this trend.
You could go back to that word, sober as sober can be. And really, you were just drug and alcohol free.
That's it.
The word sobriety is a state of mind.
Facts.
I mean, it's you know what I mean. So when you're drug and alcohol free, that's different. But you're not sober.
No.
You were just and the whole time you're thinking like, I wasn't that bad. You know what I mean? Like I could do what and the whole time you're just drug and alcohol free.
Oh,
You know what I mean?
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, I would go to meetings too. That's the crazy part. And you think that you're doing something, right? Like I would sit in the back and I would judge people and all these other things.
Exactly.
Talk to girls after.
Oh, you know that. Like that was coming. I won't get too far into that.
Right, you were getting sicker.
I really was the whole
you
entire
were.
time. That's the thing they warn you about, but you don't believe them, right? Because even when you're sober, you're still as delusional, especially early sobriety, you're still delusional.
Of course.
You know what I mean? You're still delusional. I would sit in the back and I would judge people. I'm not like them. They didn't have it like me. What I'm doing is disassociating myself with other people. So because I want to continue to do what I want to do.
And because you're full of fear.
Full of fear.
And you weren't actively working the program. You
Nope.
might have been going to a meeting here and there, maybe every week, maybe a couple of times a week, but you didn't have a sponsor. You didn't work the steps. Am I right?
No, 1,000%. 1,000%. That's the thing. So, and I was a jailbird. I would go in and out, in and out, in and out, right? And like jail is more comfortable to me than other being home. I didn't know how to live life successfully. It's what they talk about. Pray to misery and depression. Check. I couldn't it says that sweet relationships are dead. Check. Right? I did more harm when I tried to get sober than when I was out there drinking and using. Why? Because I was just stale. I wasn't doing anything. And what came out? All these different character defects that you need to work on to get sober. And I was a tornado. That's what the book talks about. I was a tornado. And I would continue to just hurt other people. But I used to go to these meetings and I used to look at those steps. This is early on. And I'm like, they can't fix me. They can't fix me. I die from heroin. I go away to jail. I can't stop drinking. I'm robbing my mom. I'm robbing the only people that love me. Then I'm afraid that they actually might work. See, that's what the crazy obsession, right? The sick, they say that, right? It says that, to accept spiritual help or die an alcoholic death. And my brain is so sick, I say, well, how bad of a death are we talking?
Right.
Because that seems like a better alternative to me. Because I don't want to have to put the drink or the drug down. I don't want to have to. It's the only thing that I've known forever. It's the way my dad ended passing away. It's the only thing. That's like my identity was so far wrapped up in that.
That was your destiny, bro.
It was. Well, God had other plans, baby. Let's go.
Sure did.
Because God is a fan of the underdog, Sam.
Always.
That's been my experience.
I always say God protects the alcoholics.
That's facts.
And he
That's
protected
facts.
me after, numerous accidents and mishaps, and God always looks out for the addict and alcoholic.
It's the truth, and he still does for me. I'm blessed because I'm not just dry, right? Like I'm actually living in recovery, and I have been for 13 years, and I'm so grateful that I get to open my eyes. That's the true blessing. Anything that comes after is just a bonus. And I'll tell you this, I'm really in the stream of life today, right? Like people call me to help them and all these other things, and I love that. They're doing more for us. Obviously, we know that in recovery, but I'm of service today. And that's the beauty of it, because I have a whole network of people in my life that pretty much are all sober now, right? Like they're all sober, we're all doing the deal. And it says it's an experience you don't want to miss. And anybody out there that's listening to this, as a person who's in long-term recovery and even a pastor now, we will speak about that. But I'll say that I'm executing dreams on a daily basis. I really am. I remember I didn't have nothing. I mean, I came from a crack in the ground, a hole in the wall. Right?
I always say you were born in a puddle on the side of the road.
That's facts. Yeah, that's right. I used to shoot puddle water, so.
True. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Sammy knows me. We go back, and I'm just really grateful to draw a sober breath today. How about that? A lot of people don't have that word called gratitude and grateful in their life, and I think alcoholics and addicts especially are like a different breed, right? Because we get to wake up every day. It's like, yeah, things ain't going as the way that I planned. But I'm not shooting dope.
That's right.
I'm not drinking. Now, there's always people that say, well, sobriety's enough. We know that it's not, right? Because you could just be sober and you could be lying on your taxes. You could be cheating on or whatever. So sobriety isn't enough, like we keep going back to. It's the truth. But underneath of that is this life that they talk about beyond your wildest dreams. And what does beyond your wildest dreams for me look like? Obviously with my kids and my wife and my ministry and all that stuff is amazing. But the number one thing that I came to AA for is the number one thing that still keeps me here. I don't have an obsession to destroy my life today with drugs or alcohol. That is the life behind your wildest dreams. If you're a true alcoholic like me, I used to wake up, drink, go to sleep, drink. I could not stop on my own power by no stretch. A judge would put me away. I would stay stopped for a little bit. And then I would come home and I would pick up very quickly. So that reason that they talk about the life beyond their wildest dreams, it still is the number one thing that keeps me coming back to sobriety is because I don't think about picking up a drink or a drug today. Amen to that. Praise God. Can you imagine?
I remember the early days, like when I first got sober, I used to have a definition of what life beyond my wildest dreams actually looked like, and it probably was filled with a big house and really expensive cars. And today I look at my 3 daughters every morning when they spill cereal all over the table and it's getting on the floor and it's getting lodged in their fingernails, and I'm like, this is it. This is I could have never asked for this.
This is amazing.
This is the greatest thing that could have ever happened to me, and I never even knew that this would make me so happy.
Oh, it's the best, isn't it?
Yeah.
And even when times are bad, it's still great. I've never had it so good. People ask me how I'm doing, and I say I'm doing great. I don't want it to change. Why? Because I probably ruin it. You know what I mean? I want things to stay the same as they are right now. Like, I'll probably
You'll want to mush it. Yeah.
I know, you know me. I'm a mush, dude. I don't want to miss this, dude. The less control I have over any situation, the better it is for everybody involved. Well, that's what they talk about in the book, too, right? He's a stage character. This is what he wants his fellows to see. He's always trying to arrange the play. The Bowery is the best he sees fit, and all these other things. There's one part and I wanted to talk about my mom real quick, because this is important. Because I know if a mother's love could have got me sober, you'd have a different speaker today.
Mm-hmm.
That's a fact.
Sure.
My mom is a good woman. She's always been great. And the reason she signed her parental rights is because I was 12 years old running the streets with people carrying guns and stuff. Like, I mean, that's just the fact of the matter. And she couldn't give me the discipline that she thought this guy could at his, foster home. There's a part in the big book where it says this, passing all understanding is the patience that wives and mothers had with the alcoholic. Had this not been so, many of us would have no homes today, or would perhaps be dead. Passing all understanding is the patience that my mom had with me. Had it not been so, I would be dead.
100%.
There's no denying that, right? And my mom is as tough as they come. All my brothers were street dudes. So like like I said, and we all touched the penitentiary. She had to be that way. Love comes in many different forms, and she had to show me that tough love. And that's why when I got sober, June the 11th of 2011, it was my sobriety date, and I'll talk about that for a minute. I was, 26 years old, convicted felon, in and out of people's lives. I didn't believe in God. If I did believe in God, I would say to myself, why would a God want anything to do with me? I was a shell of a human being. Died 3 times. I mean, you could just add to that list. In and out of, all these correctional institutions, in and out of my mom's life, my stepfather's life, robbing them, just doing crazy, crazy stuff. And I'll never forget, June 10th, I robbed this dude for heroin on the streets of North Philly. I robbed him.
Where at?
In North Philly.
Oh.
And I only robbed him because he was in a wheelchair. It's terrible.
Oh, yeah.
It's the truth. He was selling heroin. And I knew he didn't have a motorized one. So I knew he couldn't catch me. So I took him. And I robbed him for, he only had a bundle of heroin on him. These are just the facts. And I went and I tried to kill myself.
With the bundle?
With the bundle. So I put 7 bags in one shot. And I felt like this was going to be it. So I went behind the supermarket, went up the hilltop where I used to go use, and I did all 7. And I woke up from that a few hours later. I couldn't even kill myself right, is what I said to myself. I couldn't even kill myself right. And I wanted to die. And I walked back to the abandoned house where I was sleeping at on Cambria Street, if anybody knows where that's at. It was a shooting gallery. And I had a strip of carpet in there, Vinny, so I always felt like I was doing something right. You know what I mean?
Strip of carpet?
Yeah.
Somewhere to lay your head?
Like, I might be living in an abandoned house, but not like the one down the street.
Right.
You know what I mean? We got carpet in here. I had a strip of carpet.
That's hilarious.
So I said, I can't even kill myself right. And so I started walking back there. And I'll never forget it. This is how I got saved. And I see this Spanish church. There's a lot of Spanish churches down there. And I seen on the sign that said free pepperoni pizza. And if it's free, it's for me. And I said, man, eating is a luxury when you're out there ripping and running like I was.
Oh, 100%.
Yep.
What?
Not a daily occurrence.
No, not at all. Now it's like, I can't even keep the weight off. But I'm just saying, like at that time, I always say I look like Forrest Gump when he stopped running with the beard. You know what I mean?
I look like the Crypt Keeper.
Yeah, you still do. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. But So I went down there. It was free pepperoni pizza. I love pizza. So I walked into this church and they said it's downstairs. And I go down there and like I said, I looked like Forrest Gump. Like I just crawled out of a cave. My beard was all straggly and I was already on the run for a year and a half. I have open warrants for my arrest because I never went and met with my parole officers ever. That was just not going to happen. Why would I sign myself up to be locked up again? And that's what they used to call me. They're like, are you showing up? I'm like, no. They're like, all right, you know what time it is. I'm like, yeah, I do. Which meant that they were going to put out the warrant for me, the detainer. That's fine, but I'm not going to waste your time. I'm a G like that, you know what I mean? I'm not going to burn your cup. I'm higher than a giraffe's butt right now. So I walk down into this. He tells me to go downstairs. It's in the basement. So I go downstairs in the basement, and I'm sitting there eating my pizza, and it was all Spanish people down there, and I'm not Spanish. I say I'm not Puerto Rican. I'm Puerto Rican. You know what I'm saying? So I always ran to the Spanish neighborhoods. Excuse me. And so I was downstairs and I was eating this pizza, and this Spanish pastor had a handlebar mustache. I'll never forget it. A big black handlebar mustache, and he starts speaking in English immediately. He starts speaking in English, and I'm sitting in the steel chair. I'll never forget it, with a white Dixie plate with Pizza Hut on my plate, and I'm eating it. And he starts speaking in English, and he starts walking closer to me. And I said, "Oh boy, the mood here changed. This ain't about pizza no more. This is about me, I think." And he starts talking about this God who was foreign to me. He starts talking about this God he said, God is ready to redeem you. God is ready to forgive you. No matter what you've done in your past, God has a hope and a future for you. And I started tearing up. He could see right through me. And I did what anybody would do in that situation. I ran away. But not before I grabbed 3 slices. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So I grabbed 3 slices, and I'm running out of there. And I'm back to the abandoned house. And I ate the pizza, and I sat there, and I have like a couple bags of heroin on me still. And I was like, I'm not going to do it tonight. The next morning, I woke up, and I was running with this guy. This is a classic. I was running with this guy, and he had a StarTAC Motorola flip phone. Remember those?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course.
Oh, dude, you know, he had minutes on his plan.
Yeah.
And I said, buddy, you
You
ain't
buy
got
the card.
He was homeless with me. And I said, buddy, you don't got an unlimited plan? He's like, bro, we're homeless.
Right.
And I was like, loser.
We got
No,
30 seconds left on
yeah,
this thing.
I'm like, you're a loser, dude. No, I'm only kidding. It was like that generation's Obama phone. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
of course.
He didn't have minutes on it. And he's like, you can use it. So I used it. I picked up the phone that morning. I still had the heroin in my pocket. And for whatever reason, looking back, I know it was God inspired. But for whatever reason, I wanted to hear my mom's voice on the other end. I haven't spoke to her in years. Last time I seen her, she works at a school. The last time I seen her, I was trying to beg for her for $20. She works at the school video. This is classic too. And the bell rings for the school. And I know she parks out back. So I was hiding behind a dumpster. I haven't seen her forever. And she's coming down the steps with all of her coworkers. And here I come, crawling out from behind the dumpster. Mom!
Oh,
Mom!
my God.
I look like the crypt keeper. Yeah. You got $20? Her face was so mortified. Her heart was broken. She said, I'm going to call the cops. I said, can I still get the 20?
You can call the cops, but can I still get the 20?
Throw it in the dumpster. I'll get it. That was the last time I saw her. So I wanted to hear a familiar voice on the other end. It wasn't a call to ask for something. That ship sailed. I robbed her of everything. Whew, and I can't give it back. I can't give it back. And it was just to hear a voice of love on the other end. And my stepfather answered the phone. My stepfather, Jim, rest his soul. He picks it up the phone, and he says, Judy, your youngest son, Jason's on the phone. And I hear her in the background, and she says, I'm prepared to bury him. I never want to speak to him again. And it probably wasn't the first time she said it, but it was the first time I heard it. And my stepfather shifted the course of my life forever. He said, I know I'm not your dad, but I sure as hell do love you like I am. And I refuse to turn my back on you. He said, turn yourself in. And he hung up the phone. At a time when love was the only thing that mattered and I knew nothing else really mattered at all. I wasn't too tough or too scared to ask God for help. And I thought about this Spanish pastor. And I thought about the things that he said about this foreign God that I didn't believe in, or I didn't know that I could trust. I said, God, I don't know if you're real, but I need help. And God is still in the miracle business. And he did. God helped me right there in an abandoned house on Cambria Street. And I'm just so grateful that God still answers prayers. And he answered mine. I had this amazing experience that I felt this great white light around me. And it felt like time stood still. After hearing that from my mom, I thought my life was over. But God intervened in my heart, and I realized that it was finally just beginning. And I did what any sober, smart person would do. Not sober, but not drinking or using drugs. I turned myself into the jail that served the best food.
Of course you did.
Yeah, I mean, I've been to all three in the local area.
It's all about the food and the bed.
It really is. And I gave the heroin to the guy. Looking back, probably wasn't the greatest move, but I gave him his phone back and the heroin. And I turned myself into authorities that day. And I haven't thought it necessary to put anything in my body stronger than a leave in 13 years. To that which I call as God's grace in my life. And I'm so grateful that he did. And I remember turning myself into Montgomery County. We talked about it. Montgomery County Correctional place saved my life, no doubt about it, because I've been to other ones. And it's because they serve the best food and they have the weight room. Not that I cared. I was 90 pounds.
The best mattresses.
Yeah, they do. They got the best mattresses. They're, you know, I mean, the Duxiana mattress. You know what I mean? It's a sleep number. No, I'm just kidding. It ain't a sleep number.
It's a Serta.
Yeah, no, it ain't even Serta.
It's a blow-up bed.
It really is a blow-up bed. Yep. You could probably bounce off it. It's like a trampoline. And I remember going into...
It beats a plain carpet, though, doesn't
Oh,
it?
yeah. No doubt about it.
That's what I thought.
No doubt about it. Nowadays, I'm like a wuss, too, man. My house gets really hot. I'm like, turn up the AC. You know, I remember, you know, out in the streets, I would be sweating.
100
Sweat.
degrees,
What?
nowhere to go.
And then the cold.
My wife says that to me all the time. I'm like, what's the thermostat at? And she'll be like, 71. It's 71 in July? And she'll be like, you completely forget where you came from.
yeah.
That's
Facts.
right.
You know, it's wild, though. My wife, I didn't really know Malvern like that growing up. That's where my wife is from. So, you know, when I first heard she's from Malvern, I thought she was from the woods. You know what I mean? So I'm from the hood, she's from the woods. It's a perfect combo. She's like night and day. Sam will tell you. She's like, no, God bless her. She has longer sober time than me, and she ain't afraid to tell me that either, Vinny, right? She's
It's
amazing.
all about seniority.
Oh, yeah,
at
no
this
doubt.
point, right?
You know, there really is. She's amazing. Shout out to Barbie. She's been the greatest influence in my life, no doubt about it. Giving me 3 beautiful kids. I love her more and more each day. That's a fact. But I will say, you know, when I told her, you know, when I first got sober, or excuse me, when we first met, we'll talk about some of our, you know, runs that we're on, you know, because she's in recovery too. And she'll tell me some of hers. And she's like, you're next. And I was like, God, don't say it. Because she's going to leave you. You know what I mean? Yo, give her the PG version. We've been married a decade, praise God, so she knows all of them now. But this is the first, early on in our first few dates, because she was sober for years and I was sober for years, just so you know. It wasn't some 13-step type of deal.
Right.
Was it years?
Yeah, it was. She was coming up on 3 years.
I met my wife when I had 30 days sober.
Well, look at you now, though. How long you guys been
God
together?
bless her. 10 years.
Decade. Yeah. But you're the anomaly, though. Let's get
100%.
let our viewers know that one.
100%.
Oh yeah. My first couple relationships in early sobriety were not the best. Let's just be honest. Like, I didn't know who I was. Let alone, I was living in a recovery house. What can I offer somebody? You know what I mean? You want to come back to the recovery house, we'll watch a movie around 20 other guys, fresh out of state pred.
Play some spades.
Yeah, what can you? yeah. Shoot your shot, dude. Yeah. But yeah, so like, you know, I remember turning myself into the probation department, and they said you can't do it there. This is how I know spiritual experience is only temporary, and you got to work at your spiritual condition on a daily basis. When they said I can't do it at the probation department, I got to go to the jail to do it. I think the lady just didn't want nothing to like to have to process me because I looked terrible. And I'll never forget it. You know, my immediate thought was go back get those bags, go get the bottle, go.
Oh, you had already given up.
Oh yeah, I was headed back. I still had one token for good measure. I'm going back down to get my stuff off that guy. Maybe take his phone and take it to the pawn shop too. That's the kind of life I was living. You know what I mean? Take his phone too. I'm at it. I was not no Boy Scout dude. I'm not proud
The
of
next
stuff.
12 hours have been mapped out in your head.
Oh yeah, it's a wrap. Yeah. And as I'm turning to leave, a sheriff was there, and he said, "Listen, you can run, and I'm not going to chase you, or you can turn yourself in, and I'll take you to jail." And he put his hand on my shoulder. And there's another book that I read that says, what seems to be the flimsy reed is actually the loving hand of God. Mm-hmm. And I knew that God was using that sheriff to stop me, right? And he put his hands on my shoulder, and I cried like a baby. And there was people waiting to see their probation department. And I said, these are tears of joy because I love jail. No, I'm only kidding. Just in case they
Right.
they violated. Yeah. They're like, oh, that's that loser that was crying like a baby in there, dude. They ain't taking my honey buns, dude. They ain't having it. You ain't gonna take my honey buns because they ain't having it. So no, but all jokes aside, like he saw through me too, and he took me to jail. At the time, I used to smoke cigarettes. I don't anymore. And he let me smoke a Newport 100 in the back. I'll never forget it. He's like, here, smoke this. And that was like the best cigarette I ever had in my life. And then they put me in a holding cell. And this is how I got the call to ministry. This is all the same day within 10 hours.
Talking June 11th?
June 11th, 2011. And they put me in there. And what happened was as soon as they shut the door, because they're about to process me, as soon as they shut that door, I immediately thought, this was a bad idea. Because I got sick. I'm talking about throwing up and other things.
Oh, yeah.
And I was so sick. I was fine all the way up until then. Until I hear that. I was like, oh my God.
The door shut.
Restless legs. I'm like, why didn't you do a bag? Like, that's what I was thinking.
You had him too.
Yep, I did. And then I looked down at the other end of the bench and there was a Bible there. A life recovery Bible. And I'll never forget it. I opened it up. The first time I opened it up, this is me sick as a dog. And I read Isaiah 41:10. It said, fear not, do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I'm going to strengthen you and uphold you with my righteous right hand. And I knew that God was saving me to save me 100%, but he was also saving me to talk about the age of miracles that's still upon us. That God is still in the miracle business. And I knew in that moment that God was calling me to ministry, which is wild to think about. I remember calling home to my mom within a few weeks, and she graciously answered. And I said, Mom, good news, because she knew I turned myself in. She was like, you didn't turn yourself in. They locked you up. I'm like, no, look it up. Because she's like, she used to call me a show and tell. Show and tell. You're a show and tell person. You know, tell me everything and show me nothing.
You are a show and tell person.
Now I show and tell, baby.
Yeah,
let's go.
Right.
Yeah, let's get it going. But I remember calling home to her. I'm like, good news, Mom. I'm going to be a pastor. She said, is this before or after probation? I was like, good point. Touche. You know what I mean? Yeah. I said, but it's happening. She's like, you do sound different. It's because I am. God had a hold of my life, and I started holding little Bible studies while I was in prison, and God has given me a gift of gab. I used to use it for bad purposes, but now I use it for good. And it started growing, and it was amazing, right? I was like, yo, this is really, really working out for me. And then they put me back into Frankfurt, rather. I went home to Frankfurt, living in a recovery house, and my mom called me up, and she was like, you know, I'm proud of you. I thought that was like speaking Chinese to me. I didn't know what that language was like. She's like, I'm proud of you. My stepfather was obviously in my life too. They still love me at arm's length. My mom wouldn't let me see her until I had a year of recovery on the street. I'm not talking about the year I just did. A year on the street. Jim, my stepfather, oh man, I might cry. He always came and saw me, no matter what. He was an amazing man. There was times that I was sick on the street, and I would call him up, and I would ask him for $20. And the only reason he did that is so I didn't hurt somebody else. He's like, I know what you're doing, Jason. And I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing this for the person that you're going to hurt. That's what I'm saying. I don't deserve everything I have. That's a fact. Some people might say that about me. Like, you know, but I deserve far less than I got. It's the truth. Because I hurt a lot of people to get where I'm at today. And I'm not proud of it. And God, you know, God blessed me with the ability to put the work in to get to where I'm at today, which looks like making amends. That looks like paying people back. I've been 13 years, you know, I don't really I make direct amends now, but everybody that was on my list to make amends, I did it. Why? Because I had to, if I was going to stay sober. And it was a real deal thing for me. They're like, it's cool if you don't, but you're going to die. Like, that's what they said. I didn't come from this lineage like, well, you know, you can take it easy. I didn't come from that.
Let's not worry about that yet.
Yeah.
I love when people say, why not?
Yeah. You know how people make lists. And if you do, praise God, just make sure you do them all. But like I'm grateful that I had great sponsorship and still do. And my sponsor was like, it's okay if you don't do it. It's not going to make a difference to me, but you'll die. And that was like very, very real for me. He used to say, Jay, we don't care about your feelings. Feelings is what got you here. I'm not going to high five you on the way to the graveyard. No. He's like, I know people that know this book in and out. Guess where they're at? The graveyard. Why? Because they don't live it. They're not living it. So he's like, this is what we're going to do. We're going to make this list. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. And I did everything I could to a T because I didn't want to die. And lo and behold, the miracle happens when you actually put the work in. I didn't think about doing drugs or alcohol. I started thinking about what I could pack into the stream of life. I had people that cared about me genuinely, that weren't my mom and my stepdad. I had a gang of a host of friends, and down in Frankfort, Kensington, it's the best because people are just looking for help. They just want you to help them. So I was sponsoring a bunch of guys doing my deal until it was time for me to move up out of there, and my mom let me move back into her house because I got pistol whipped. Listen to this, Vinny. It was the second time I was pistol whipped. The first time I deserved it, though. I ain't going to go into details about it. You know what I mean? I ain't going to go into details. It was the first time that I was pistol whipped where I didn't deserve it. Somebody robbed me of my Jordans. I don't wear Jordans anymore. I got a dad bod, 39 years old, about to be 40 minutes. So I might throw a Jordan on every once in a while, but I'm like more boat shoe guy. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
I live up here on the main line,
Showing
baby.
your age.
It's crazy because all my neighbors, we're on the main line. I'm talking to these people about mulch. You know what I mean? Like, yo, hey, Seth, what are you putting in your mulch over there? Dude, he don't even know,
Oh, that's
bro.
a nice color.
Yeah. And he's a Philly firefighter. I don't want him to look at my past. He's going to move. You know what I'm saying, Vinny? He's like, yo,
If he looked at your past, he would move.
no doubt about it.
Yeah.
I remember my old neighbor at my old house. She was like, I want to come hear your testimony. I'm like, are you sure about that? Do you really want to come hear my testimony? You might pack up and move. But I remember I was pistol whipped and the gun jammed in my face. The dude was going to shoot me. And my mom, I called my mom and she's like, do you want to move back home? And I did. And that's when, things started to take off and even more so. And this whole time I knew God was calling me to be a pastor. I knew that God had a control of my life. And I'm sponsoring people, and I haven't spoke to my real father in quite some time, long time. And I knew he was out there ripping and running still, but I'm back in my mom's life. I'm back in my dad's life. And I was going to meetings and sponsoring cats, and I'll never forget it. My buddy was like, you want to go to this meeting in Westchester? And this was over 10 years ago. And I was like, nah, I'm good, because I was working late. You know how it gets, you know what I mean? I'm a couple years old.
Life gets good.
Yeah. Like, I'm good. And Chris is his name, and he's still sober, praise God. And he said, all right, but there's somebody there that wants you to sponsor him. And I just moved back to Delco in Westchester. I never even really been there like before. So I'm like, that's strange, but my name does ring bells, though, Vinny. This is the ego, right?
For mostly the wrong reasons years
yeah.
ago. Now for the right reasons.
Amen. Well, God, see, that's the thing about God and my ego. God will use my ego to crush me and help somebody. Like,
Absolutely.
it's weird. Like, because at that time, I look back on it, and he's like, this guy, he's asking for you. He really wants you to sponsor him. And immediately, I was like, yeah, that sounds about right. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I hop in the car with him.
You probably owe him money or something.
Yeah,
he just wants
exactly.
to see you.
Yeah. Well, it was wild because I'm in the car ride with him. He's like, you're an idiot, bro. There ain't nobody knows you in Westchester, dude. What are you talking about?
God, you're so good.
I'm like, dude, why'd you do that? He's like, I just wanted you to come. And he's like,
God.
But he was wrong. There was somebody that needed help. And that was me.
Mm-hmm.
I shared from the floor. I'll never forget it. And after I shared from the floor, I was outside of this meeting, and somebody taps me on my shoulder. And I turn around, and there's this cute little hippie chick. And I said, oh, God, I'm going to ruin this. And she said, hey, dude. And I had to, I'm more of a street guy, so I had to throw it on like extra yuppie. I'm like, hey, how are ya? Fancy seeing you around these parts, madame. You know what I mean?
Oh my God.
Like I had to throw it on extra, And so she's like, I just got to tell you, I heard you speak before, and you radiate the love of God from you. And I said, oh boy, I'm in trouble.
Definitely.
Yeah, I'm definitely in trouble. I said something like, you smile, puppy dogs, kiss rainbows. I don't know, something real corny, but it worked. I got to marry my best friend. At a time when I thought that I was going to go help somebody, God was helping me. And that's the thing. Everything I have in my life that's of any substance, any blessing, any miracle, anything that I'm grateful for in my life came at the other end of me getting uncomfortable for somebody else. Let me say that again. Anything I have of substance is because I got uncomfortable because I was trying to help somebody else. My wife is living proof of that. Yes, I was full of ego, thought somebody wanted me to help me, but the point is I got in that car because I thought that dude wanted me to help him. Turns out there wasn't any dude, but there was me, and God was using that. Now I have 3 beautiful kids. See, if I'm not inconveniencing myself in my sobriety, then I'm not doing it right. I got to inconvenience myself at all times. Still to this day, if somebody calls me, will you take me through the steps or whatever, generally I'm so busy. I got a full life.
You do.
But I have to. It's my duty to. I can't say if somebody else will. That's proven. Look at the statistics of people coming into recovery and only 2 or 3% sponsor the rest. I can't say that. I can't have that on my conscience because I don't know if somebody will. Look at my dad. Look at my whole life has been ravaged by drugs and alcohol. Ironically, the thing that used to kill me is the very thing that keeps me alive, right? Of being of service. It's actually given me a life of purpose. And then, I'll speed it up a little bit. We're already 45 minutes.
We're good, bro.
Yeah, because you know me. I'll keep going. I can talk about the color blue for 10 minutes, and you'll actually like it, too. Like, I never seen it that way. I can sell salt to a slug. It's not... I can, though, baby. Let's go.
Yes, I know.
And I know you know, Sammy. But, I was inconvenienced that I thought, and then, God given me my beautiful wife, and we had a beautiful son named Max, but I'll never forget it. Early recovery, this is... After sponsoring people, I still do, praise God, and all these miracles that have taken place in my life. And my wife has just been such a blessing. And we moved into an apartment in Media, Pennsylvania, Delco, right? And it was the smallest apartment in the world. You could fry an egg and, take a shower at the same time. It was, I'm telling you, it was that bad. And she's 9 months pregnant. And I'm like, I'm not what you call like a silent guy. Like I'm more loud. And sometimes I could be obnoxious, I feel. And just imagine a woman 9 months pregnant in a small apartment with this mutt, dude.
Dealing with you.
Yeah. I'm like, what are we doing for dinner? She's like, you gotta scream it, dude. All right, I'm right here. Like, and it was hot. We only had a window unit. Like, it was barely working. I didn't have much, but we had us, and that was enough, right? Like, when you boil it down, I didn't have a lot, but I had everything, right? And that's the truth. So I'll never forget it. She's like, all right, my water broke. So I'm 9. She's 9 months pregnant. I put her in. I had a truck at the time. I put her in the truck, and I'm driving on my way to Lankenau Hospital. I'll never forget. This is great. I'm driving over this bridge where the trolley used to go under. I've slept under that trolley before. I wanted to jump in front of the high-speed train right there multiple times. I just couldn't bring myself to do it. And it hit me. This is the same bridge that I wanted to kill myself under.
In Havertown?
Yeah, the Summit Inn Hotel. That's right. There you go. It's a very fancy establishment.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, we said the name, but
that's all right.
Yeah, Summit Inn. It's a fancy establishment. You pay by the hour. No, I'm just kidding. But
by the minute.
Yeah. So, make a long story short, I'm driving over this bridge, and I turned to my wife. She didn't know this story, and it's a classic that I wanted to tell her. And she's over there like, I'm like, Barbie, did you know this bridge? One time, she said, today's about me, damn it. And I said, oh my God, I'm so sorry. In true alcoholic fashion, I tried to take the shine from a pregnant lady.
Going into labor.
My selfishness knows no bounds, dude. That's crazy. I told her the story later. She loved it. But, And so I went to the hospital, and I cut the umbilical cord, which, was a whole experience and everything. And I got to hold this beautiful baby boy, Maxwell. But I couldn't think about the time that I was under that bridge wanting to die, but not wanting to live. And now I'm not only am I wanting to live, but I'm ready to give, ready to bring my unborn child into this world for the very first time. And I remember sitting there looking at him, holding him, and I thought about the time that I overdosed and died and didn't want to come back. And I shuddered to think that I almost missed this. And I'm looking at this beautiful baby boy who's 10 now. Sheesh. Who's 10 now. Amazing little kid, by the way. Maxwell. I love him to death. And I have another son, Paxton and Miles, and I'll talk about them real quick. And I almost missed this life. And that's what I'm saying. Like, God is a fan of the underdog. God is still performing miracles. And I almost missed this. We moved into a bigger apartment later on. And then I actually got my first house, like an amazing stuff, but I'm still sponsoring dudes and still going through the work and still being accountable to my sponsor. I think accountability is something that a lot of people lack in recovery sometimes from my own personal experience. And as long as I'm accountable to somebody, my sponsor used to say, all we got to do is follow the duck's ass in front of us. And that's the truth. All we got to do is follow the duck's ass.
So simple.
It really is, And like sometimes I veer from the path, and I got to come back
quite frequently
because I am an ass. Yeah. Excuse my language. I don't curse. That'll be the only time I do. I don't curse behind a pulpit or a podium. By the way, never do. I try to be a good representation of the program that I'm a part of, and I'll never forget it. So my wife is 9 months pregnant with our son Paxton, and we're living in a house at this point. And I was already preaching and pastoring. I went to this church my first week home from being incarcerated. I had to travel there. I knew some people there, so I was like, I'm going to link up with you guys. So I had to travel on a train to get there from Philly, and I should go up there. And I'll never forget. I went up to the preacher, Andrew, Pastor Andrew. Shout out to Pastor Andrew, one of my first mentors in Christianity, 100%. Still love him like a brother. And I went up to him after the sermon. I'm like, yo, what's going on, buddy? He's like, good. I was like, my name's Jason. He's like, my name's Pastor Andrew. I said, that was a great sermon. I said, but yo, when can I preach? And he said, wait, excuse me? He's like, I don't know who you are. I was like, yeah, like, God's calling me to be a pastor. Yeah. And he said, where are you from? I was like, no, I just got released from incarceration last week.
MCC. That's where I'm coming from.
Yeah. He said, all right, well, that's not going to happen, okay? He's like, but let's sit down and talk about some things, right? Because I knew God was calling me to be a pastor, but I needed other people to actually confirm that was true, because we can be delusional. So I walked through this process. 9 years later, I got my master's in divinity, right? I dropped out of school the first week in 9th grade. Took me 9 years, easiest 9 years of my wife's life with a bunch of kids.
Even as your friend going through that with you, this guy would call me at Tuesday, 11:30 at night. He'll be like, Sam, wait, you have to listen to this paper I just wrote. And I'd be like,
Hey, yo.
dude, I'm going to bed. Send me the paper. You know what I mean? He's like, no, I'm going to read it to you now. And he would read me the law. And I don't know anything about this depth of Christianity. Like, he's in master's level theology classes reading me these things, and I'm like, yeah, it's great, Jason. I'm really proud of you, buddy. You're really smart. I'm so proud of you. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm like, good.
But I didn't realize at the time what large force was at work here until I actually went to go see him preach at his church. It was incredible. Yeah. It was so incredible. And I'm happy I answered the phone all those times.
You did, dude. You got me through, man. I'm like, you think that's fire, right? Don't you?
Yeah. Yep.
Well,
it's good.
Honestly, I was like surprised at myself, right? Because I couldn't even make ice cubes before this, right? Like I could mess up ice cubes. That's not the brightest bulb. So I had to get my GED. I had to go get my associate's degree. I got my bachelor's degree, and then I got my master's. I never took a break, because I know if I took a break. But these were like, it was the best being in theology school too, because you'd be in there and you'd be up with other people trying to be pastors, and they go around the horn. Give us your testimony. And I'm like, I would be like, my name's Kay, so they always did it alphabetical order. My dad was raised in the church. And everybody's like, yeah, that's great. He's like, I was on the worship team when I was 4. And they're like, what about you, Jason? I shot heroin in my neck. You know what I mean? I shot heroin in my neck. They're like, oh my God. They're like, okay, next person. Yeah. My introduction isn't the same,
Never.
But it doesn't matter, right? Like it could be quickly, sometimes slowly, but it always materialize if you work for it. That's why I tell people in recovery too. Like, I sponsor people that aren't Christian. Like, my only job is to give them the steps as outlined as I was given it to. I don't have a monopoly and all that when it comes to recovery. You come to my church, you'll hear a different thing. I mean, that's just the facts. I believe in Jesus. But when it comes to recovery, it's like, any man, woman who's suffering, or kid at this point, right, that they can get sober too. They provide a few simple steps, right? And it's the truth. And like, I just always kind of like remind myself of that, because I have very strong convictions when it comes to my religion. But I'm open and honest with people, right, about what I do for a living as a pastor. Like, that's my job. I work for God. Like, that's the truth. And I always feel like that's a huge burden that I heartily accept. And I walk that narrow path as a pastor, right? Like, I do. But when it comes to recovery, I do the same thing, right? We got to actually be all the way in. You can't have half foot in. What do they talk about half measures? What are they as avails? Nothing. If you go to work for 4 hours and you get sick, you go home, you get four hours of pay. Not in recovery, you get 0. That's what they say. You put half in, you get nothing.
Nothing back.
Remember that end of Willy Wonka? Nothing. You get nothing. And like, I just see
Good day, sir.
Good day, sir. But it's going to be a bad one if you leave. That's the facts of my own experience. And so when I met with Andrew, I know we're going around corners a little bit. I was going with Pastor Andrew, and I said, and so he took me under his wing, and he's noticed the call in my life, and he helped me get established. And I became a youth pastor 4 years in up to my recovery. Then I became the associate pastor, which I was for 6 years in, and all these amazing things. But I was preaching sparingly. And then what happened was, my wife was 9 months pregnant. We're living in this house, and my wife was like, it's time. And so I officially became, as a youth pastor, I think it was at the time, or no, as the associate pastor, one or the other, I became an official pastor on staff at the church. And I'll never forget it. So I was preparing my sermon. I already preached before, but this one's like, I'm official Pastor J, right? And I'm like a ball nurse. It took me a while, by the way, to get.
You
that
had an
title.
Office. They gave you an office.
Oh, I got an office. Yeah,
definitely. You were the real deal.
No, I was the real deal.
I remember.
Yeah, I was a real pastor, not a fake one. We're not preaching prosperity gospel. Like, Christianity's hard. God is calling you to the narrow path, and sometimes that's going to hurt. But that's the whole. We could do another podcast about that later. But I will say. I was a ball of nerves, because I invited everybody. It's the one you were at. So I'm like, I'm a ball of nerves, and my wife, and this is Saturday night, right? Obviously Sunday's church. My wife's like, it's time. And I was thinking, what, breakfast? Like, what are we talking about here? She's like, no, it's time for me. I didn't say that, by the way. And she said, it's time. I think I'm having a baby. And in my mind, I'm like, man, this is bad timing. Like, I didn't say that. I'm still married. Barb, we're going to edit this part out. No, I'm just kidding. I didn't say that. And I was like, all right, cool, let's go. So I rushed her over to the hospital. False alarm. We didn't get home until Sunday in the morning. Sunday. And I'm like, I haven't slept or nothing. So I'm sitting on my couch. And I was like, I'm just going to pull an all-nighter. This is what I'm going to do. And my phone rings. And it's a number in Florida. In the line of work we do, Sam, somebody can call. It was like 4 a.m. And I answer it, and I hear hospital machines in the background. And then I hear my dad, my real father, who I haven't speak to in a decade or whatever it's been. And he could barely speak. It was real faint. He had tubes in him. And he said that his liver was failing, and he probably has 3 to 4 days tops to live. This is the day that I'm about to preach my first sermon. And we spoke for 2 hours. And he asked me to forgive him. And of course I did. Of course I did. My other brothers didn't answer the phone. My dad ruined a lot of things in his life. He did, and that's just a fact. But I told him that he could die knowing that his youngest son forgives him, and not only that, loves him. And I meant it. Why? Because I did the 12 steps. Because I've been forgiven. And a lot of healing happened on that phone call. And I went to, and I preached my first sermon ever as a paid pastor. Crushed it. And
Nice.
And so that was Sunday. My son was born Monday, and my dad died Tuesday. And a year later, I was sitting there, right around August is when it happened, and I was sitting there wondering, why me? Why do I have to go through these emotions every August? And I was reading my Bible, and it said, to whom much is given, much is required. And I've been given a lot. But the greatest thing that I've been given is that I've been given the gift that the obsession to drink or use drugs has never returned. As long as I stay in fit spiritual condition. And then, my life has just been amazing. I have another beautiful son, Miles. So Maxwell, Paxton, and Miles. 3 of my greatest blessings. There's a Puritan term for children. Puritans were like a Christian group way back in the day. They used to call them dangerous blessings. That's what they call children. Yeah, you know what I mean? I found
Facts.
It's a pretty good, adequate thing, right? They're like my greatest blessings, but man, it's a lot, Yeah. But it's a very important task. My first task. So yes, I'm a pastor, but my first ministry lies at home, for sure. And even in recovery, they say that. It says a much greater display of our principles lies at home in our respective workplaces. That's a fact. You can come to meetings and spit fire, do all that other stuff. None of that means anything if you're not being a respectable work member, if you're not being a respectable husband, a respectable wife, a respectable child to your parents. You know what I mean? Like all that stuff actually matters because you need to be hitting on all cylinders in your recovery in order to stay sober. That's what I've come to find. And I can't put anything above it. It's got to be number one in my life. My wife does too. She sponsors women and stuff. Obviously, making meetings is something that we're trying to do better with, no doubt. We're just so busy. We own a successful business that she just sold. Praise God. I mean, all these gifts in life. But the greatest gift, it still goes back to the reason why I entered into recovery in the first place is the obsession. And I see that, right, in our society. I see that in our recovery movements now today. The drugs are stronger. There's no way around it. That's just what they are. And, like, people are leaving AA, and I just want to reach out and tell them, like, it doesn't have to be that way.
I know.
Or any recovery movement.
Why do you think they're leaving?
I just don't know if they've actually gone through the process, right? Because like we were talking about before the podcast, what are we talking about? Change.
Yep.
Change is uncomfortable, but change is mandatory.
I think COVID changed AA a lot too.
Oh man, it did, dude.
It really, really did. A lot of people entered AA in a time that it was all virtual, and then simultaneously, you could see a therapist virtually as well. Mm-hmm. And to be honest with you, I just don't think AA hits the same when you're not in the presence of other alcoholics physically to really sit down and explain somebody the depths of the language that was written in the 30s. You know? So if I'm sitting looking at a computer screen and this knucklehead sitting across from me is talking about God, and I grew up in a kind of a broken Christian household, you get turned off. They get turned off. Mm-hmm. It's different, and it breaks my heart. It breaks my heart that people are growing away from AA.
Truth be told, though, people have been coming and going out of AA and NA since its inception. True. You know what I mean? Like, those people probably aren't ready.
Yeah. And that's like the unfortunate reality is, right? And it says that happy day may never arrive. We're always going to have people dying from alcoholism and addiction in America and anywhere in the world, right? But for sure, I think COVID was rough. But I do think that like a lot of the reason why people are leaving a little, I don't know if they're leaving more, but I would imagine that they are, is because like people don't want to get uncomfortable anymore. Like, because you look at our culture, and it's not just addiction or alcoholism, and it's Christianity too. Matter of fact, it's everybody. It's everybody. Is selfishness, self-centeredness is the core root disease of alcoholics and addicts, but it's also that for every human, by the way. Pride is such it says it comes before the fall in the Bible, and it's the truth. Pride is the number one thing, because you get somebody that comes in there, they're too prideful to talk about what happened when they were 10. Like, you know what I mean? That pride is always going to be the killer, and I think it's up to us as people that have been sober long enough to know, it's like, yo, it's okay. Right, whatever you're going through, we can get you through it. There's no way around it. But you're right. Sometimes that day won't arrive, and I think it's up to us to make sure that it decreases. Right? I'm tired of seeing people dying. Alcoholism is on the rise because of COVID, like you said. Yeah. A lot of things, because the world that we live in, it makes it as such. And what I'm talking about is everybody wants a quick, easier, softer way in life, not just in recovery. In life. What I've noticed is that people want fixed and they want it now. You want a package, Amazon Prime, and now they got one day to suit your pleasure, right? Nobody wants to wait anymore. Nobody has to go through the pain that it's going to cost for you to successfully arrive at the destination that you're hoping for.
No one wants to put the work in.
I'm broke. I want it fixed right now. And if it's broke, I'm going to not fix it. I'm going to go get a new one. Look at marriages, 50% all-time divorce rate. Even Christians make up a majority of that number too, so let's not get it twisted here. Why? Because people are only too focused on their wants, their needs, and their desires. If they stop focusing on themselves as less and they focus more on what's going to benefit the people around them, they're going to be better.
Always.
That's the truth. And they come out with all these new modalities and treatment and all these things. And I say kudos, right? Like anything that helps anybody. If somebody says, I run around the block 10 times and it's kept me sober, well, try 11. You might have a new spiritual breakthrough. I don't know. It's none of my business, right? Like, unless they make it my business. I mean, obviously, I would say do the steps, but you get my illustration. I want people to, my baseline for recovery is a pulse, right? That's my baseline. But what you see is, you see people that just are continuing to focus on different things that they think that they're going to fix them. But really what it comes down to with all these new treatment modalities, like you see them all the time, go pet a horse. That's great. But at the end of the day, it's going to be one person helping another. That's always going to be the principle. And that's what's always going to lead us out of the devastation that we're seeing, because drugs and alcohol are ravaging our communities.
Petting a horse is pretty good, though.
It is.
You ever done it?
Yeah,
it's magical.
No, and like let me shout out to the horse lovers, by the way. Yeah. They're going to be banned.
I was terrified of them.
Equine therapy. Yeah. It is very good.
No doubt about it.
Terrified of the horses. They said, "Listen, take this brush, go out there and brush it." And I was, wow.
Yeah.
Wild.
I'm just saying though, at 3 a.m. and the horse farm's closed.
Yeah, you have to put the work in.
That's
absolutely.
What I'm saying. So let me just go on saying, like I just said, whatever keeps you sober, I want you to be sober and free. Like that's the thing, and have joy, not just happiness. Happiness comes and goes. I have indomitable joy. Like you can't steal from me. Why? Because I used to be a crumb, now I'm less of one. I'm getting better every day, baby. Let's go.
That's right. Yes, you are.
All right, brother. Well, listen, we're at our time.
Perfect.
This was such a pleasure for me.
Me too.
Your story, it resonates with me so much because there was a point in time where hearing your story actually saved me. Amen. And I know I've told you that before.
It's the power of love.
So every time I hear it, it hits the same too. That's Amen. How you know it really means something to me. Vin?
Absolutely inspirational. I enjoyed the heck out of this podcast. You got an amazing story. I appreciate you coming on. Any closing statements?
Yeah, I just want to say one thing for anybody who's listening. I don't care if you got 1 day or 100 years. Remember that the smallest words of love driven by the power of God can save somebody's life. So just remember that. Stick with that. The words of love driven by the power of God has the power to change communities and has the power to heal. So shout out to everybody. I appreciate you guys having me on.
Thanks for coming, brother.
And praying for your guys' podcast. I love what you guys are doing here.
Thanks for coming on, brother. My name is Vinny. I'm an alcoholic and an addict.
I'm Sam, alcoholic and an addict.
One more time.
Pastor J, alcoholic and addict. Baby.
My man. And you're listening to Tenacious Recovery. You got to be tenacious if you want to stay sober. Thanks for listening. God willing, we'll see you next time.